Hello, everybody. This is Chris from OpenMindSpace. Tonight's episode will be airing on June 23rd at midnight. And what we're going to talk about tonight is how to expand beyond the mental limitations of Western thought and experience. So, like many of you, I have lived in the West for all of my life, and I was born and raised, under Western thought, basically. It wasn't until my teenage years that I even began to really explore any different kinds of thinking. And I think Western thought is extremely valuable. It has certainly revolutionized the world. It has helped drive innovation, and many great things have been accomplished by it. So, as I see it, Western thought is pretty good at rational problem solving, survival sorts of things. Uh, so, if you want to figure out some kind of scientific problem or something of that sort, it works pretty well for that. It's basically an alert problem solving state of mind as I understand it, and that's obviously valuable to have. I think everybody benefits from having that, and there's many cultures that didn't have this kind of thinking who have once they've obtained it have been able to not only have the benefits of their own ways of thinking, but also integrating this in there and have solved many of their problems. However, I found that as I continue down this path, that there's ultimately limitations on what you're able to accomplish internally with Western thought. And this is something I wasn't really aware of until I started to read, things like the Tao Te Ching and study Tai Chi and study yoga and things of that sort. And what I learned is that many of these philosophies and disciplines are able to completely transform your mind to where much of the kind of ambiguity and emptiness that I recall experiencing during my childhood was filled with great richness. Once I learned to really understand the conscious realm more, and that's where I think many of these ancient practices add value. The first kind of real meditative practice I learned about was Zazen, and it was through a book called Zen Mind, the Beginner's Mind by Shunryu Suzuki. And what it really taught me, what kind of stayed with me from this book, is that you can kind of still the mind, that you can work on stilling your mind, and there's a number of techniques, specific techniques, of course, that can be done to do this. But when you still your mind, it's kind of like stilling a pond, and you can then see through the pond. Whereas when you've got all the ripples and waves in the pond, you can't really see. You're confused. And I think this is the problem that, I know that I experience when I'm not really at my best. And I think a lot of people experience this and don't even realize it as a problem. So I think most of us, when we go about our daily lives, are often out of control when it comes to how our actual consciousness operates. Merely, we're kind of responding to stimulus, responding to patterned behaviors that we've gotten into, such as we want to wake up at this hour, do these things, go to this place, and so on. And our thoughts, of course, center around doing those things. And we have often a chaotic array of thoughts, and we don't make any effort to try to control how our mind operates and how our experience is. And so, in a way, we're kind of our environment has a lot of control over us. And I think, depending on how we become accustomed to interacting with our environment, we end up having potential problems as a result of this. I know in my case that if I don't still my mind on a regular basis, I end up with a lot of anxiety and possibly depression, pain, and there's a lot of things that just kind of build up in you. I've had a lot of experiences where I've done no sort of meditation, no sort of yoga or tai chi or anything for a long period of time, and it really, you really start to feel bad after a while. And what I realized is that this feeling bad is actually a form of normalcy for most people. And when you do these kind of things, whatever practice works for you, you're able to clear up a lot of the unconscious aberrations that are occurring in your body and in your mind. There's just it's hard to even really get into. It's such a deep subject, but there are probably dozens of unconsciously tense muscles in your body, and there's probably countless thoughts passing by that are just completely beyond your awareness. And until you're able to quiet everything down completely and relax it and become more one with your own self, you're not really aware of this. It's not until you hear what it's like for things to be quiet and relaxed and calm and peaceful and open that you start to see what's really going on in your little internal world. Contrary to what many may believe, you have a great deal of control over your body and mind with your intent. And there are practices such as Tai Chi, which allow you to really become a master of the different energies of your body, so that you can use your mind to really take control of your experience of life, your body, and everything. So if you're depressed, if you're in pain, if you feel like something's missing in your life. I remember I used to watch the talk shows when I was in school during the summer while I was off, and there would always be these people on there just talking about how something was missing in their life and things of that sort. And I think quite often what's missing is a genuine connection to yourself. And that's why I think things such as yoga are very popular in the West, because they are one of the few widespread things that's really giving people a connection with their body and their self on a very deep level. And what people are starting to realize is that you don't have to be in pain, you don't have to be depressed, you don't have to be locked in a kind of robotic problem solving state of being all the time. There are states of being that transcend all of that, which allow you to experience an aspect of yourself that is foreign to Western thought for the most part. I mean, turn on the news. What do you see? You just see, oh, problem this, problem that. You know, people grappling for, I mean, obviously the news is propaganda. And the thing is, the news also in many ways represents many people's state of mind. If you look at the news and the TV shows and the just what goes through people's experience, I mean, they go to work, they're used as tools to produce something, and then they come home and quite often people spend several hours watching television. They watch shows and they watch commercials, and it's all about generally solving problems, and then of course the commercials are about trying to peddle products to you, and there's very little in the way of anything to kind of still your mind or help you to become in touch with that aspect of yourself. So it's not surprising that people are kind of imbalanced as a result of this, and that's really why I want to talk about this. I mean, this is a show about freedom. Well, I think that freedom begins in yourself, internally. Obviously, there are a lot of factors that on the outside world that are governed by what other people have chosen to do. And it's important to discuss those kind of matters and complications and solve the various problems and educate people about what kinds of things are likely to happen in, given circumstances. Especially, very predictable circumstances like statism. However, you may only have one life, and in that life, you may live under statism for the entire life. I think you will. I think that's very likely. I think that these kinds of great sea changes take a long time. It's not to say that it won't happen, but it's good to hedge and understand that while you may want something to happen, you may be upset with the way things are right now, that there's a great deal that you can do inside your own existence, inside the little bubble that you have. You own your own mind, and if you open it to these possibilities, and there's nothing new about it, it's just something that's kind of taken a long time to disseminate into the Western world, because there's a lot of it takes a lot of time to have information move around, and fortunately with the internet it's a lot easier to find who actually has authentic information and to network and to spread ideas and that kind of stuff. So we have a great advantage now that not many people have had, in that we can take what we've learned from the Western thought that has helped to revolutionize, this kind of rational state of being, and we can use that where it's useful, and then we can also use Eastern thought to help to expand what we're able to be aware of and what we're able to experience internally. So our internal worlds are more rich and interesting and peaceful. So without getting into too many, specifics, what kinds of things can one hope to accomplish by exploring Eastern thought? By exploring, practices such as yoga and Tai Chi and various forms of meditation? What kind of things can we hope to accomplish? Well, we can certainly reduce our stress levels significantly. We can overcome, in many cases, physical injuries. There's much that, if we take yoga, for example, if you practice yoga properly, you can greatly reduce the internal stresses in your body. You have all sorts of muscle tension, muscles pulling things out of alignment, and that kind of creates a vicious cycle where you have muscles, you have scar tissue, you have stress in your body. You may not even be aware of it, but there are muscles that are tense right now in you that are just yanking at your frame, that are perpetuating anxiety inside of you, and they're perpetuating problems and long-term, possibly chronic issues that you could have. And you're not aware of it consciously until you really start to work on yourself. And so if you do something like yoga, you start to see, you start to feel all those things. You start to realize, like for instance, much of the leg stretching type stuff is, part of it is physical, in that you've got to make your muscles more pliable and flexible and whatnot. But I think a great deal of it is actually mental. And I notice in myself, like I can totally, bend all the way down and put my hands on my feet and stretch all the way down. But I notice, especially if I'm not really in a good state of mind, that I won't be able to do it at first, and then I'll realize, oh yes, I forgot. I actually can do this. I can go all the way down, and it's totally a mental limitation that says that I can't do it. There's also things like standing on your head. You can stand, and I was able to do this just after a couple of months of practice. You can stand completely on your head in the middle of a room with a couple of fingers on the ground. This is something I can do now. You can basically just stand on your head and balance on your head. And I know that before I ever even experienced yoga, I would have just thought that's crazy, or that's something that only some amazing, monk could do who'd been practicing their whole life. But no, that's something you can do, and that's something that has benefits that are, tangible, and teaches you something about yourself and teaches you about what you're capable of. If anything, I just like knowing that I can do it. When you can turn your world upside down and be comfortable, when you can be upside down and perfectly at home and comfortable in your own body, then even if there are no other benefits to it, I think it's amazing. If you can stand with your hands on the ground, maybe near a wall for support or something if you need it, but with your hands on the ground and holding yourself up with your feet up in the air and just stand there like that, that's gaining self-knowledge. And there's, of course, benefits, in terms of strength and tone, and all that kind of stuff. And the more of this kind of stuff you can do, the more you start to master your body. And so all these little aches and pains and problems, they start to go away. I remember when I first started learning about some of these things, there was a seminar with a fellow named Bruce Bowditch. He's a yoga teacher, I think, from Arizona. And I wasn't aware much about yoga at the time, but he was talking about some of his experiences and how he had gone to these retreats where you spend hours and hours every day doing yoga. Something that I've never done, but I would love to do someday. I mean, I've been to seminars where you spend a few hours, but never a lengthy retreat where you just go somewhere and spend just massive amounts of time doing practice. But he was talking about how when you really get into it like this, to where you're doing it so much, you start to release really old emotions from your body. Like our mind stores emotions in our body. You know, you may have had something that happened to you um, that really hurt you, and what our minds do is they kind of store it somewhere in our body, and we likely are relatively unconscious of it because it's always like that. And when you do things like yoga, it really forces it out, um, especially lengthy sessions and lengthy, you know, workshops or retreats. It starts to force it out, and some people actually start crying. The stuff really starts to come out of them, and it's very unsettling when it happens, because you start to this stuff that you're used to, that you're comfortable with, that's just there all the time. It's not there anymore. It's just a really weird feeling, and it's funny in some ways, because I think that many of us are, in a way, self-saboteurs, and that we don't necessarily want to solve our problems. We like those problems. It makes us feel comfortable having familiar problems to deal with. When those problems are gone, what do we do next? Often the worst thing one can do, in some regards, is to get what they want. And so, learning how to, do these kind of things can sometimes give you what you want, and it may be unsettling. It may be kind of painful in some ways, because you lose some of your purpose in life. You had certain challenges, like you had certain physical problems, and you always had those to deal with and always had those to face, and thought they were, you know, intractable. And they're gone because you've done something good for yourself that helps to deal with those problems. And the next step, of course, is to find the next thing, is to peel the onion back further, because you know you can practice these arts for your entire life and still improve. And that's one of the beautiful things about it, is it's self-cultivation. You know, you're not just solving external problems or building some kind of career, or doing things in the outside world. You're doing things in the inside world. And when you really work on the inside world, you find that there are just endless marvels. There are endless things that you can work on and improve, both in terms of your physical body and on your mind, and then, of course, on the mind's mastery of the physical body. So I'd like to talk a little bit about this concept of energy that is in Eastern thought, and I think that it's unfortunate that it's difficult to discuss this in a Western setting, because many people poo-poo all over it. They just think that there's no, that's just a bunch of useless New Age rhetoric or something of that sort. And I'll give you that many people who discuss these kind of things don't really know what they're talking about. They've never really cultivated energy or chi or anything like that. Or if they have a very limited understanding. And I've been one of those people. I spent many years searching for, real answers to these kind of questions, and started out with an extremely vague understanding, had many misconceptions, and I finally feel like I'm starting to grasp what it is and how to use it. And this is after, I've spent, I think I started this search in something like 1998, so it's been about 15 years searching for these answers. And I would say that one of the ways that you can learn about energy is to experience it. And that's where, we're all about here in the West empirical understanding of things. So if you want to have that empirical understanding, you got to try it. You've got to try and get some kind of experience with it. If you just kind of believe it doesn't exist, and that's fine if you don't believe it exists, or if you're skeptical. I certainly started out very skeptical, but I was skeptical but open-minded, and that allowed me to try things. And you know what? I had no problem if I ended up being wrong. Like I thought maybe that there was nothing to it, and tried it out and said, maybe there is something to it. Let's try it and see how it is. And I would say some of my first experiences with energy were just practicing Tai Chi and seeing how it made me feel, seeing how it just brought my whole body to life and just made me feel extremely good. And I felt just circulation everywhere. I was able to practice outside in a t-shirt and very cold weather and feel wonderful. So those were some kind of early hints and clues. And then I had some experiences with acupuncture where I went to an acupuncturist feeling, really bad, and I was eating a rather standard American diet and living a rather standard American life. And I went to this acupuncturist and explained that I felt, my energy was stagnant and that I needed some help, some kind of help. And he, we discussed diet and we discussed my lifestyle. And after a couple of treatments, he did this thing called a suction cup. There's, in Eastern thought, or Eastern medicine, I guess, more specifically, there's this concept of energy meridians in your body. And there's been, a fair amount of scientific study on acupuncture, acupressure, and the kind of benefits you can get out of that. It's not something that has not been touched by science. It's just something that is quite different from Western medical concepts. And he took the, he did the treatment, and when it was time for me to go on my back, they do, you lay down on your back, and they do some needles on your, the front part of your body, and then you lay on your back. Well, when it came time to do on the back, he said, I'm going to do a suction cup, and I had no idea what this was, but there's a meridian right around where your kidneys are that I had, low energy. I had a lot of problems, just low energy, just kind of being depressed and generally lackadaisical. And so he, decided that that must be my problem, and put a suction cup on the kidney meridian. And it's basically, I didn't see it, but I've since learned more about it because I was, on my belly, and I didn't really ask a whole lot of questions about what exactly he was doing. But I think it's actually a glass ball sort of thing, with, one side open, and they put it on, and they light a piece of paper on fire inside of it, and it burns up the oxygen inside of there. And in doing so, I guess it causes the air to expand out and and creates a vacuum kind of suction inside of it. And I remember when I felt it, it was, wow, it was amazing. It was a very intense feeling. I'm guessing the flame and all of that for starters, but then that flame feeling continued because there was a lot of, there was a vacuum kind of suction pulling at it. And I just kind of let go. I just kind of, I'd already done Tai Chi and I already knew how to kind of try to let things happen and let things flow. And so I let go, and I noticed a dramatic change in my body during this experience. I noticed blood just flowing like crazy. I noticed, particularly, I started to feel areas of my body that I'd never really felt before. I started to kind of feel what I pictured as energy actually going in to my kidneys, and just feeling all this amazing circulation in there, and things that I really would have a hard time even putting into words. It was just an amazingly vivid experience. And I laid there for quite a while, probably 10, 20 minutes. And when they came and took that suction cup off of there, um, and I sat up after the treatment, I felt like a new person. I felt like, just all sorts of energy. I felt like I had a redwood tree for a spine, like I had a really strong, thick, powerful posture. And I think that was due to all the energy that was flowing around me. And I went to bed that night, and I woke up the next morning, and I literally could hear the blood flowing. I had so much blood flowing in my body that I could actually hear it. And this is totally unusual. I just had such great blood flow increase from this that I could hear it. And one thing that Chinese medicine talks about is how the blood follows the qi. And so if you have a lot of qi flowing, you do have greater blood circulation in your body. So that would kind of make sense in that regard. But the pathways that are at work here are basically your kidneys are a producer of this qi. You're like, if you're a girl, it's your ovaries. If you're a boy, it's your testicles. And of course, your kidneys also produce this qi. And it flows up your back and into your head and then back down. And I noticed just an amazing rush of this energy into my head. And actually, I think the first time that he did that next morning, I felt this rush of energy, and it was like a tsunami, just coming into my head as I woke up. And I actually, it kind of overwhelmed me in some way, in that my ear actually swole up to where it was actually physically swollen inside the ear canal. And I went for I think I had weekly appointments with him at the time, and I went and I told him about that, and he said, well, the ear and the kidneys are kind of connected by this, meridian. So the energy must have flown out of the kidneys and into the ear. And he did, some kind of treatment, and it went right back down after he did that. So that was kind of amazing. I'd never in my life even thought such a thing was possible, or thought there was such a connection. So it was quite an interesting revelation about what sorts of things are going on in the body. So through acupuncture, I know many people have trouble with addictions, cravings, stress, like they're smokers, or they eat crappy food, or whatever. We've all got our vices. And I was, at the time that I did the my acupuncture treatment, I was smoking cigarettes. I was probably smoking about a half pack a day, which was quite a bit for me, and eating badly, as I stated earlier. And after a few treatments, I think it was not even very many treatments at all. It was just a handful of treatments. I was able to stop smoking. Like, I felt no desire whatsoever to smoke. I felt that whatever smoking had gotten me, I was feeling that constantly, or I was feeling the kind of fulfillment that smoking could not have provided on a continuous basis. And then when I started experimenting with diet, which I think is another important aspect of our internal energies, is having a good quality diet. If you eat garbage all the time, if you eat junk food or you eat, you know, just a ton of carbs and just don't understand, nutrition, you're going to have trouble with your energy as well, and you'll have illness. Um, but I noticed when I started experimenting with diet, then these this ball that had already started rolling of my healing process started to improve drastically, to the point where, there was almost a kind of ecstasy about it. It's like I would eat more vegetables and do things of that sort, and just kind of transform myself. And it made me want to transform myself even more. It was kind of a snowball effect. And that's what this kind of self cultivation can do. Is you start to realize more, and then when you realize more, you start to see more that you can change, more that you can control, and how you're less at the mercy of circumstances. Um, I don't know how many times I've seen, people of a Western kind of mindset talk about how, oh, circumstances made me whatever. Like, they have a problem and they say, oh, it's because of just circumstances that are out of my control. And I think that's a very enslaving kind of mindset, because you become a slave to your circumstances, and you don't take control of them. You don't put your mind into the mix and really try to change the situation. And if you instead cultivate self-knowledge and understand the energies of your body, if you do these things, then ultimately I think you'll find that many of the seemingly, intractable problems, um, whether they be depression, addictions, weight issues, or what have we, are totally under your control, and they always have been. And the problem has just been that you haven't tried, and you haven't, or you haven't known how to approach it in a way that was effective. And the way to figure out how to approach it in a way that's effective is to, gain knowledge about yourself and to learn how your mind really works. If you do take that path, then there is a really good chance that over the long run, you will end up living a longer life, or at the very least, living a life of higher quality. I can tell you from my own experience, I feel as if my quality of life has gone up dramatically. Um, I went from just the daily rituals and routines of life, of having to take care of my responsibilities and that sort of thing, to having these beautiful experiences where I get to step out of that paradigm for, could be as little as a half hour, an hour, maybe a couple hours. Nowadays, I practice at least go to class, a couple hours, 2 days a week in most cases. And I try to practice at home if I can. But having these kind of escapes from reality really lets you to defocus. I don't know if you've ever there's this technique called palming, where you put your palms over your eyes, and you open your eyes wide open and you see nothing but blackness. And when you do that, I know that when I do it, at least, I find that it reduces my eye strain and I start seeing things more clearly and more as they are. And I think that's kind of what these experiences do, is they put you in a completely different state of mind where you're just focusing on, you know, your body and the energies and your consciousness and in your body, and cultivating those. And then when you get back into the quote unquote real world, into the world that you're accustomed to, you are much sharper and able to face the reality of those situations. And I find more optimistic and more, more having more charisma and just more energy to really enjoy life and to really enjoy even the difficult types of things, because you're feeling better inside of your own body and mind, and you can just be happy within your own skin. And as somebody who's gone through lots of depression and anxiety in their life, you know, feeling happy in your own skin is just one of the most valuable things that you can possibly possess. It's one of the most liberating and freeing things that you can possibly do. Um, as an anarchist, you know, I often lament about all the problems in the world that I'll probably never solve, and that will probably never get solved, at least in my lifetime, if not maybe in many lifetimes. But there are many problems that are just right before your fingertips, that are right here, and that you can just handle, yourself. Why not start with that? That's where the big revolution happens, is when people realize how many things they can do themselves, how many problems they can fix within their own skin, within their own body. That solves a lot of problems. If you can make yourself very healthy just by a healthy lifestyle and healthy practices that keep your spirit strong and your body and mind strong, then you'll stay out of the doctor's office. You won't be, going to the doctor every couple of months, most likely. I mean, some people will anyways, because they have greater challenges, and maybe there are genetic problems, or maybe their problems are so serious that it takes a long time to deal with them. But I think that your average person, if they work on themselves, can stand to stay out of the system quite a bit. And the more you can stay out of the system, the less impaired you're going to be by its limitations. When you are put into a hospital, there are certain, abilities you have to control the experience, but you're by and large at the behest of these government regulated hospitals and all the privileged, licensed physicians, and their capacity to tell you what to do and to inject you with things and give you pills, and in some cases even force you to stay there or force you to do certain things. And of course, it all comes at great cost, which makes you dependent on potentially health care and health insurance. And this dependency on health insurance and health care is greatly overused, I think. I really think that if more of us were to explore not only alternative kinds of medicine, but also lifestyle changes, like practicing yoga, like practicing Tai Chi and things of that sort, that we would find the need for these things greatly reduced. I mean, it would be to where our internal constitution would be far stronger, and we'd have much less need to go into the doctor. And that could save a great deal of money and a great deal of anxiety and stress, and you know, just all that comes along with that. I mean, who wants to go to the doctor and be administered, you know, steroid shots and antibiotics and have our body flaring up in weird ways and have just inexplicable symptoms all the time? That can greatly be reduced by cultivating your energy. Because if that really is the blood, the breath of life that flows through you, then having a mastery over it is going to be having a mastery in many ways over your health. I mean, while just having a mastery over the energy isn't everything, but also understanding the dietary aspects of it and so forth, that is a way of mastering your health. And that is a way of staying out of the hospital and staying out of the whole government controlled system and being less dependent on it. And, maybe you'll find, if you don't have the need for it, that you could just buy some kind of high deductible insurance and save yourself tens of thousands of dollars and not pay into some cartel system. Because when you pay the insurance premiums, obviously many of us have to anyways. We have disabled relatives or we just feel that the risk is just too much. But, if you do find yourself being very healthy and you don't need it, maybe you can get some kind of high disability or high deductible policy, and that way, you're covered if something serious happens, but you don't have to pay the tens of thousands of dollars a year to have the whole, the whole coverage. You save up some money, and then you're covered if some catastrophic event occurs, but then you're not, shoveling huge sums of your income into this system that is not designed to make you a healthy person, but more designed to respond in a reactionary fashion to problems. That's the dichotomy I see here. Is in Western thought we react to problems for the most part, whereas I think in this Eastern thought we're building up ourselves. We're building a body that is integrated. We're building a body, mind, spirit kind of complex that is integrated. And that often means we don't have to react to problems because the problem never arises in the first place. There's many Tai Chi people, for instance, who've practiced Tai Chi well throughout their lives. They live to be very old and very capable. They've, the martial practitioners, those who actually understand the martial aspects of it, are able to defend themselves against, 20-year-old men, teenagers, old men, and it's amazing, what can be done. I'll have to do a podcast with some videos of what these guys are able to do at some point in time. But suffice it to say, it is astounding, what you can do when you really have a mastery of that, and then you gain also the martial mastery by practicing the Tai Chi forms and the pushing hands and developing song. Song is this deep kind of relaxation that you learn in Tai Chi, and once you have it, all sorts of possibilities open up because you're no longer inhibiting your energy. The problem that many of us have is we are just actively inhibiting our energy by trying to muscle ourselves around all the time. We're trying to, do everything with strength and stamina and so on. Well, there's many things that you can do by kind of letting go of a lot of that. It's something I really don't have time to talk about in this particular podcast, but suffice it to say, you can let go of a lot of that tension in your body, and the greater the degree to which you can do that, the more there's some amazing feats that you can accomplish, both in terms of how you can defend yourself against somebody much stronger than you, and also just how able you are to relax and understand, your body, and just remove all the unconscious tension inside of all the unconscious bullshit that's just going on, for no reason, that's just completely irrational. I mean, there's no reason why, like there's people who sit down all the time, for example, there's all these muscles in their legs that are just tight as hell and that are tensing up in just weird ways. And there's no rational reason why that should happen. I mean, and the reason why it happens, there's obviously a reason why it happens and it makes perfect sense, but there's no reason to let that stay that way. And it doesn't do you any good to let it stay that way. And so even from a purely Western, rational kind of approach, it makes sense to deal with it. It makes sense to learn about your mind and your consciousness. Because if this is what you're using to think about your reality, then even if all you care about is problem solving, having a clear mind to solve problems with, that you have great level of control over, and a healthy body that's flexible and health, obviously healthy, as I said, and energetic and agile and loose and has great circulation and so on, is going to be much to your advantage in whatever you choose to do. I think you'll find that if you haven't explored this realm of Eastern practices and thought and so on, that if you do, and if you find a decent place to do so, because there certainly are a lot of people who don't know what they're talking about or who are full of shit. I'll be the first person to tell you that. Most of the people who teach Tai Chi don't know anything. It's hard to find a good Tai Chi teacher. They may be able to provide you with some exercises to make you feel a little better or help you develop some self-discipline, but most of them don't really have an authentic form of Tai Chi. It's just something that got garbled at some point, and it's screwed up now, or it never was authentic to begin with. Yoga, on the other hand, is a little easier to find a decent place to do that. There's places all over the place that do decent yoga. That's one that propagates a lot easier because it's more instantly gratifying, I think. So it works better with Western kind of impatience, I guess you could say. People are kind of impatient. They want results now. And you get much quicker results with yoga, and there's less that you have to kind of conceptualize to be able to do it, because it's just doing postures, But I think that if you do decide to do that, if this is something you haven't explored, that it will open your mind in many regards to the possibility of there being a kind of spiritual aspect to your being. And I'm not even talking about, like religion and God and all this kind of stuff. I'm just talking about that there being a spiritual aspect to existence, that there being another kind of, what would you call it? That there's a kind of a meta realm that is beyond mere happenstance, physical phenomena interacting. That there's a level of organization that is on the conscious level that that you can begin to understand and explore, and I think that's extremely liberating to do. And I think that being in the kind of zeitgeist of Western thought can often prevent you from experiencing those possibilities, to where there could be all sorts of information about yourself that you can learn and about reality. And if you don't, I mean, sure, be skeptical about it, but if you aren't willing to try and be open to the possibility, then you're just never going to become aware of it, because there's never going to be a reason for you to become aware of it in the normal course of your day unless you're just curious about it. If you don't possess that curiosity and you're merely just looking for ways of solving problems and explaining things and that kind of stuff, using measurable research and that kind of stuff, you're going to be missing out, because an aspect of reality is internal inside your body, and there's not going to be the kind of rigorous scientific data that you might like to have in order to be able to validate this with your kind of Western skepticism. And I understand why people have that skepticism, and it's important, but you got to try things too. You got to try new things. Maybe it's a waste of time. Hey, it could be a complete waste of time. But if you go into it with a shitty attitude, that you just think, oh, this is total bullocks and I'm here to disprove it, then odds are you will disprove it and you'll get nothing out of it. But if you're at least willing to maybe dip your toe in and try it, and try some of these things, I think you'll find yourself a lot freer. And if that's what, this whole liberty movement is all about, let's start the liberty in ourselves and figure out what's possible just in our own skin. Let's figure out what's possible in our own lives and expand out from there. And if we had a society of people who were liberated within their own minds, not only by understanding rational thought and philosophy and liberty and that kind of stuff in a abstract sense that is often becoming popular these days, but also the kind of spiritual aspect of themselves. If that were understood as well, in conjunction with this idea that we shouldn't be violent to each other and we should allow each other to be and explore and live and grow and innovate and evolve, that would be a very powerful combination, because we'd all be getting healthier, we'd all be becoming more aware, all sorts of new ideas would come into the fray, and there's no telling where that could end. There could be, you could end up in a golden age, if something like that caught on, we could be living like the supposed Atlanteans, very high level of technology and understanding of problem solving, as well as a high level of mental technology that would kind of help to reinforce one another. If you develop this keen awareness of yourself, of how you think, of how you are, and you also are developing, technology alongside that, it will just reinforce itself as, an exponential curve of innovation and improvement. And, of course, as you learn more, you become able to do more, and it's a snowball effect. That's how it's been for me. Like I do software development. It's just a very rational, scientific thing, and I find it interesting. There's a number of people who are scientists and engineers, college professors, who do things like Tai Chi, and you would think, oh, why would these guys, do something like that? They would realize that it's all a bunch of bullshit, right? Well, no, they appreciate something about it. They appreciate that there's an aspect of themselves that they don't get by the number crunching and the scientific rational type stuff that they're always doing. They appreciate that there's a aspect of experience that they can get by exploring their mind and body in new ways that you can't get by reading about it in a book or reading about it in a study. That it is really a kind of empirical research. It's an empirical study of your own senses, of your own, what it's like to try certain things and how it makes you feel and how it changes you. That's a empirical study if I ever heard of one, So, anyways, this is a very broad subject. I didn't think for a moment that I'd be able to cover it all in 1 hour. I just wanted to kind of scatter out my thoughts on this, and I hope that in the future, from time to time, I would love to delve into various areas. I'm not, I'm not sitting here talking about the non-aggression principle and things of that sort. And I know some people may, since this is being syndicated on voluntary virtues, I know some people may wonder, why would anybody talk about these things on such a channel? But um, the way I see it, it's about liberating yourself from the inside out, and that's maybe what angle I can bring to it. Like, I can't add anything to many of those topics. I think they've been gone over, they've been rehashed, and there's other people who are much better at discussing them than I am, and much more interested in discussing them than I am. And what I hope to bring to this equation is a unique perspective. And I want to talk about things that I'm uniquely equipped to talk about. I mean, I've been practicing Tai Chi for, about 15 years, and I've been doing yoga for, several years, not nearly as long, but thinking about these things, and practicing these things has really helped me to gain a very unusual and unique perspective on reality that a very small percentage of the population has had. And so I want to share that. I find that important to share. I'm not going to be talking about it all the time, but I think it's important enough, and that it's something that is liberating enough that it is worth talking about in this context. So that's about all I've got for today. I look forward to talking to you again